Hello, YouTube! I am Pinstar, and this is Pinstar Presents the Steam Summer Sale! So, as is tradition with our dear platform of Steam, they have released a sales event, and also, as tradition, they kind of slightly screw it up. But the screw-ups are not on the discount side of things. There's actually quite a few games that I've covered that are quite heavily discounted. So, you know what? I figured I'd compile 50 games that I have played and in some portion on my channel that are all discounted. Ordered from least discounted to most discounted. Let us begin. Links to both the Steam stores and my playlist on which I covered it are in the description. So let us begin. 6 is one of the more recent games that I've played. It is on sale at the moment with a 20% discount. We covered it earlier when it was in closed beta, and it has, from what I've seen, since improved. I haven't picked it up extensively, but it still has that island building, city building with a twist itch to it, adding into the gameplay formula the whole wonder system, which at first I will admit I was dubious about, but I have since warmed up to due to its strategically important nature. So yeah, give it a try if you're curious about it. If you haven't already played and own Stardew Valley, go ahead and pick it up right now. It is worth the purchase. I don't care what genres you're generally into. It's a good game. 20% off, you take the role of a farmer who has inherited a farm from your, I think, grandpa, and proceed to build up relationships and build up your farm as the game proceeds. My playthrough of Stardew Valley is actually holding the record for the longest continuous series on my playthrough, topping off at a couple of about close to 150 or so episodes. And your guys' excitement and interest in me continuing the playthrough is what drove that. So link to the epic playlist is in the description if you're curious to take a look. You ever wonder what it would be like if you were a stray cat left to your own devices out in the wild, having to survive, no humans around to feed you or care for you, just you, your fellow cats, and organized gang warfare? This game, not actually, well, kind of actually. This game has, like Stardew Valley, has some RPG storyline elements to it, as you can buddy up to one of the 3 factions and woo your way into the hearts of some of your fellow wild feral cats, while keeping track of your ever-depleting hunger bar and worrying the dangers that the world presents to you. An interesting little find, and 25% off if you're curious. Hopefully such curiosity does not kill your cat. Weedcraft Incorporated. I saw this game at PAX East 2019 and was curious. I'm not usually into the leaf culture as but it's actually a solid, competent title management game that stands on its own 2 feet. So even if you're not really into that kind of thing, but you are into management games, give it a try. And if you are into that kind of thing, it handles the topic with sincerity and some smartness in terms of presenting it as something that may or may not be a good thing for society as a whole, and the various ins and outs of dealing with both sides of the law to it. Give it a try. It's a fun one. Another game that I saw at PAX East 2019, Railroad Corporation, is still in early access at the moment, but it's in really good shape. The gameplay is solid, fairly well balanced, just darn fun. If you have the transportation game itch, but you don't want to scratch too hard, you don't want to get bogged down in signaling setups and overly complicated minutia, then Railroad Corporation strikes a nice balance. There are some meaningful strategic decisions to be had here, but it doesn't overladen you with the detail. So yeah, right in the sweet spot. Had a lot of fun with that, and they're still working on the game, including getting a sandbox mode out there, which I think will greatly improve it, an already good game. It's available for 25% off. Check it out. Graveyard Keeper. So what happens when you are a modern dude and you find yourself thrust into a medieval town and suddenly find yourself as the town's gravekeeper by a slightly terrifying population that you have to walk the line to make sure you're not too suspicious while still accomplishing your various goals. It has a lot of a very Stardew Valley theme to it, but with sort of a darker, macabre humor to it, which I appreciate. And the graveyard and the gravekeeping mechanics are unique and satisfying. So if you are curious about this, or you want to scratch the Stardew itch a little bit harder than Stardew itself, grab this. It's 25% off. Oxygen not included. So Clay Entertainment has been cooking this one in early access for ages. In fact, it's just about to come out in full 1.0 version. Actually, I think it should have come out already, but they pushed it back a little bit just to polish it up. And it is a darn good game. My coverage of it is a little out of date because they have introduced so many new mechanics and rebalanced some things since I covered it, but still worth a watch just to see if the type of gameplay is down your alley. It's sort of a colony builder survival, but with a real quirky twist to it in that the whole thing takes place inside an asteroid, and managing everyone's oxygen, water, and other necessities is something that requires an engineering feat. Definitely worth it at 25% off. Take a look. Airport CEO. This came out around a strangely timed glut of airport management games, but I think it is the stronger one of the field, and it's been getting stronger ever since I covered it. Basically, you take control of a single airfield and need to build up the facilities, the terminals, the runways, the taxiways, luggage, all the amenities for your guests that are coming and leaving, and just generally making yourselves a good transportation hub. Definitely, worth the price of admission by itself, and at a 30% discount, worth it even more. If you have any interest in aviation or just in general management games, check this one out. Starbound. If you took Terraria and crossed it with No Man's Sky, you would have Starbound, a procedurally generated universe in which you can explore, build up, your bases on various planets, do quests. They've added so much to the game since I last originally covered it. But if you want to see what the art style is like and just get a little taste of what the gameplay is like, go ahead and check out my playthrough of it and then dive in yourself. It's been around for a while, but they're still working on it. They're still adding stuff to it, and it's a very, very nice 2D universe explore 'em up. 35% off. I can't go wrong there. Planetbase. So Planetbase is I covered this game quite a while ago. It is a alien world base builder. It's kind of like Surviving Mars, which is a little bit further down this list, but it does its own thing in terms of making you keep track of your colonists, to keep the power on, keep resources going, food going, medical expenses, and concerns, as well as weathering plenty of disasters. It's an interesting one and a quite challenging one too. If you're looking for a game with some teeth to it, but good, satisfying teeth, not in an unfair way, I'd recommend it. I had a lot of fun with it when I was covering it. Aquarium. Produced by the same guy that did Big Pharma, Tim Wixell of Twice Circled, Megaquarium puts you in charge of, well, an aquarium. Build up your tanks, build up your exhibits, populate the tanks with various fish and decorations. But it's not so simple. Fish are complex beings. Certain fish have certain needs to them. Certain fish can be put with others, while others will just eat their tank mates. You need to carefully arrange your tanks and balance them to not only keep all the fish inside safe and happy, but also make the designs pleasing to your guests in a way that you turn a profit. It's a fun and interesting balancing game if you're into management games or if you're a fish and aquarium hobbyist. Hearthlands is a game, a sort of a walking city builder, sort of the nature of the old Caesar and Pharaoh games, but it does its own twist, as you have to not only build up your city and develop it, create products and keep your citizenry happy, but you also need to build up a military to not only defend yourself from the local baddies, but also expand your grasp. A lot of the neutral territory in your city's region is currently occupied by just neutral hostiles. I guess that would make them hostiles. It's a little contradictory. But you need that to expand your economics, to tap into things like, ore veins and whatnot, as well as conduct militarized diplomacy or regular diplomacy. Definitely a curious game worth a look. Another brick in the mall. One of my favorite top-down management games, another brick in the mall, is a curious game where you are basically building a mall. Shop by shop, brick by brick, it is up to you to build the stores, build the parking, build the amenities, and hire the staff, and program the staff's schedules to meet the demand, as demand will fluctuate as the day progresses. You can get really creative with the placement of some of your store shelves to get some extra profits by tapping in to the impulsive nature of some of your shoppers who come to visit. Nothing like taking someone who was there to buy a $2 loaf of bread and getting them to impulse buy a $1,000 laptop. Beautiful. Into the Breach. Nothing quite has boiled down the phrase meaningful strategic decision like Into the Breach. Essentially, it is a post-apocalyptic Earth that is being even further threatened by these gigantic insectoids called the Vec. It is up to your time-traveling squad of mechs, which can be highly, highly customized, to fight them off, beat them back, and achieve various objectives. Every single map seems to be so well balanced that you are always on the cusp of disaster, sometimes tipping into it, while never feeling like you are put into a completely and unfair, unwinnable situation. Beautiful soundtrack, by the way. Same guy that did FTL. Definitely worth the purchase. And it's 50% off. No reason not to. Gremlins Incorporated. I do like me a good board game in electronic form, and Gremlins Incorporated is one of those board games that was created electronically. There is no physical version of Gremlins Inc., at least not to my knowledge, but it is a fun one. Travel around the board, take shortcuts, acquire resources, and undermine your opponents. What I love about the game is the fact that the same cards that you use to buy things and play, effects and events are also the cards that you use to move. So it is up to you to decide, do you want to burn a card for movement, or do you want to hang on to it and actually use its effect? Very, very fun game, especially in multiplayer. Speaking of board games that are purely electronic, we've got Armello. And for those of you who are familiar with my channel, I think you'll know what Armello is. It is a board game where you and 3 other players are racing for the throne from a king that is slowly dying and going mad. There are 4 different ways to win each game, and tons and tons of different heroes to pick from, each with their own abilities, strengths, strengths and weaknesses. Definitely a fun one, and League of Geeks is an awesome, awesome dev. Worth it at 50% off. 2 Point Hospital. So, 2 Point Hospital, one of my most popular series of quick tip videos, many of which are still quite relevant, even though the game has continually been under development. 2 Point Hospital is a spiritual successor to the old Theme Hospital game back in the day. You're charged with managing a hospital, curing patients as they come in of all these hilarious fictional diseases, building up clinics, and training your staff. Training your staff is actually kind of the focal point, as that is how your hospital grows long term, but you got to balance the time away in training classes with the actual time on the clock, actually curing people. Definitely a fun game to be had, and definitely worth it at 50% off. Game Dev Tycoon. The second game I ever covered on my channel way back in the day. And even to this day, I booted up the other day and it still holds weight. It still is so perfect. It is so a wonderful game where you are in charge of a game development studio. You start out as just a single person, a lone wolf indie in a garage, and slowly and surely grow in size and complexity. You have different game types, genres, topics, and the technology and its evolution mirrors that of the real world, where you have the old Commodore and the NES with off-branded equivalents in the game. Very, very, very fun. I highly recommend it regardless of your genre preferences. Concrete Jungle. Another game that I actually, when I originally picked it up, thought it was going to be a city builder. But it is a city builder, but it's actually another one of those board games / card games in electronic form, similar to Gremlins Inc. and Armello. This one is pure card game, in which you are a deck builder game. You build up your deck throughout the game. Each card is a building that you can place. Where you place your buildings depends on, will determine how many points you're going to be getting with, you're trying to boost up your residential buildings while harming your opponents, or just flat out trying to steal their stuff. The only weakness to this game is that it is not multiplayer through the net. You can do local multiplayer, and you can do multiplayer versus the AI. The multiplayer mode is absolutely the strongest part of it. I just really wish I could just play other people with this, because I would totally do a multiplayer mashup of this game. Definitely worth it at 50% off. No Man's Sky. I gotta be honest with you folks, when I first bought into this game, when it was first came out, I got burned like the rest of you, and I even refunded my purchase. And I'm not the type of person that does that. However, they have improved it so much that I repurchased it, and I am very happy I did. It is sort of like Starbound, but in 3D, a universe to explore. Collect ships, fix up your ships, collect equipment, catalog strange alien beasts, and build your base on an alien world, or many alien worlds, depending on what you want. Absolutely worth it at 50% off. Niche. This game is a part RPG, part evolution simulator, part board game, because it is a hex-based piece movement or pawn movement game, so it almost kind of plays like a solo board game, but it has more elements to it that are not quite as gamified. You are essentially in charge of a tribe of these little fox-like, cat-like beings called nichelings, or at least that's the unofficial term for them. These nichelings are highly evolvable. They can adapt to their environment, but it's up to you to breed them in such a way that their genetics line up. If you got a cold environment, something with a big body is going to do better than something with a shivering cold small body, so you want to start breeding for those genetics and having your tribe adapt to the environment and the hazards within. Highly recommended. Rebuild 3, Gangs of Deadsville. So this is an interesting one. It is a zombie survival apocalypse game, which normally I'm not a big fan of the survival horror genre, because it's usually either a survival or action styled game. However, this is a pure management game, a population and territory management game where you need to maintain your city against the zombie horde, slowly expanding the reach of your safe zone while being able to fend off the occasional waves of zombie attacks and making sure everybody in the camp is getting along and is fed. Definitely a good balancing act, and definitely worth it even if you're not a big fan of the zombie genre like I am. Contraption Maker. The Incredible Machine, a spiritual successor to The Incredible Machine. Build up contraptions, build up puzzles for it, solve puzzles, and share it with the world. Your imagination is the limit, but definitely a fun little game to tinker around with. And hey, 50% off, worth the price. Tropico 5. So yes, I know we covered Tropico 6 before, but Tropico 5 and much of its DLCs are on a deeper sale here. So if you're looking for a more complete Tropico package, or there's some minutia or bits and pieces of 6 that you're not fond of or just a little dubious about, 5 definitely does stand on its own 2 feet. And actually, my guides on Tropico 5 are still one of my most popular quick tip videos on my entire channel. So check them out if you need a little leg up and a couple hints and tips on how to get started, and go rule your Caribbean island nation, Presidente. Sunless Sea. So, what happens when you have an adventure game with just a light touch of management to it, resource management, personnel management, and mix it with an RPG with a little bit of eldritch horror while we're at it? Then you've got the deeply atmospheric Sunless Sea. The game that has a copious amount of text, but read it. The flavor of the entire universe is rich, and you'll quickly find yourself wondering what's on the next island and what horrible thing have you gotten yourself into. Frostpunk. So, city builder survival. Not a genre I saw coming, but boy, howdy did when it hit, I liked what I saw. Essentially, you are a coal punk, steampunk era, alternate universe Earth, where suddenly the sky's gone dark and the entire planet is freezing itself. And it is up to you to build one of the last bastions of humanity to try and stave off the storm and figure out what the Sam heck is going on with the weather. Highly emotional, highly detailed. I loved every part of my playthrough of it. So check it out. Roguelikes are a fun genre. Not usually one I cover on it, but Slay the Spire takes the genre, adds a deck building card element to it, and mixes it too in a beautiful, beautiful blend. Essentially, you start out as one of several different characters, start with a starter deck, and then as you go up the spire, you can fight monsters, you add semi-random cards to your deck in an attempt to add more combos and get certain synergies going so that you can climb higher and higher and beat the higher level bosses. Absolutely well balanced, totally worth it. Even if you die a bunch of times in your attempts, you always want to try again to see what kind of deck you'll build next time. Empire TV Tycoon. This game, I've spent a lot of hours on this game. This game is a fun one because it is a management sim sort of coupled with almost like a puzzle game. You need to puzzle out what movies and what shows to put on for the various time slots of the day. The trick is that the people watching at any given time and the demographics are constantly shifting, and you need to worry about things like what your advertisers want you to show, what the people want to see, what your competing channels want to see, all while trying to keep a profit, as well as making your own TV shows and movies so you can broadcast your own content and not be at the whim of the movie store down below. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you're a TV or a movie buff, as they use the titles of real-world movies, and you might see some of your favorites there and actually get to use them in the game. Democracy 3. So imagine you're the head of a nation, and there are many different nations to choose from, and just like every good nation, or not so good nation, they are rife with problems. This abstracted political simulator has you tackling the role of the leader of one of these many different countries. You start the game off with a ton of different problems, and every country has a different problem under its belt. Or in this case, many different problems. Deep in debt, crime going crazy, joblessness, homelessness, you name it. The problems range the gambit across the board. But how you solve them is up to you, and how you manage to get your ideas into place is something that you need to do some maneuvering to do, as you don't have a rubber stamp to just do whatever the heck you want. Definitely a game if you like abstractions of the genre. And at 60% off, definitely worth the price of admission. Surviving Mars. So, Surviving Mars, published by Paradox Interactive. I've covered this a couple of different times, and I love this game. This actually has some feels to it similar to Planetbase, but this one is specifically colonizing Mars. It's slightly more grounded in sort of reality in terms of using science to have facilities or hypothetically scientific buildings and processes based in the real world, but there's some elements of fantasy to it when it comes to the random mysteries, which I think is a ingenious concept for a way to mix up the end game in a way you're not going to expect it. Really scalable in terms of difficulty, so you can make it a breeze or make it hard as nails, depending on your skills and how masochistic you feel. Banished. How could I do a list without mentioning the game that started my channel? Banished is literally the very first game I ever covered on my channel. And if you check out my playlist for it, and you boot up episode 1, you can see the amateur video quality that I had back in the day. I kept it up for nostalgia's sake, but as you can see, it's not up to my normal standards. That being said, I do still stand by the tips that I give in the game, so if you're looking for actually almost like a survival city builder, it's kind of like Frostpunk, just minus the story. It's a great game to get into. Still holds its weight today, and at 66% off, worth the price of admission. Go for it. Do it. Darkest Dungeon. The Darkest Dungeon. I love you. I hate you. But I love you. I honestly love you. This game has you taking 4 heroes into the eldritch horror-filled depths of the region around your family's estate manor, where your ancestor really screwed things up, and it's up to you to put things together again. Dealing the 4 heroes that you choose for your party on any given expedition are extremely important and extremely customizable, all the way down to specific quirks and flaws, as well as their classes and their skills and equipment, balancing everything and keeping people alive so that they can level up is the name of the game here, with some certain amounts of RNG, just enough to make you suffer without it feeling like it is just being unfair. Definitely a hard as nails RPG / management game, but definitely high quality. I would recommend it, and it's 70% off. Who could say no to that? Big Pharma. I covered this game in like 4 different series on my channel because I loved it that much. The original game from Twice Circled, and actually, consequently, the very first dev key that was given to me for free because I was a YouTuber. I knew it had made it big then. But he was the first one who gave me my first freebie key. So good on you, Tim. Thank you. But anyway, this game definitely worth it. Even it has aged quite well. You are in charge of a pharmaceutical company, and it's up to you to cater your cures and treatments to what the market's saying. The twist is that 1, you've got competitors to compete against, and 2, the ingredients that are available to you in the early game and, well, mid-game and further on are different every time. So certain cures become easier or more difficult to engineer based on the ingredient availability. So the way you approach any given game is going to be different. And since your competitors have access to the same set of ingredients, or well, eventually, depending on how their exploration efforts go, you have to find a way to carve out a niche in the market for yourself rather than go up head to head. Or if you are going to go head to head, be prepared to fight on price. It is a delightfully dynamic game and worth it. 70% off, get it. You have no excuse not to. Political animals. Boy, is this one a relevant one to today's climate here. Essentially, this is a fun game where you versus one other opponent are trying to get your animal elected. And you have different types of agents that you can use and deploy across the board to fundraise, to stir up voters, to suppress scandals, to cause problems for your opponent, all while trying to net the popular vote at the end of the political campaigning season. A fun little game, and actually made by Squeaky Wheel, the guys that are currently developing Academia Simulator. So check it out. It's 75% off. Planet Coaster. Planet Coaster is a game. It is a high quality game. I started playing it. My one disappointment with it was it is more of a creative design tool than it is a hard and fast management simulator. Now, I got it hoping for the management simulator parts, and it does have management simulator parts to it. It definitely is a functional tycoon style game, but the emphasis is more on your creative freedom. And people who are more artistic than me have created some insanely good builds and parks in the game. So if you've got a real burning passion for creativity and you want to get your hands wet with 3D modeling to a way, definitely pick up Planet Coaster. Renowned Explorers International Society. This is another game that is a squad-based tactics game with resource management elements as you are working on building up the skills and reputations of your various 3 explorers, building up science and gold and other fame points so that you can purchase more perks and handle harder missions. It is very well balanced, very, very fun. I have a particular trio of explorers that I've done a couple of full playthroughs through, just because I like that team so well. But there's so many different explorers to choose from that you can approach the game in a number of different strategies. Worth it at $4.99 at 75% off. Stellaris. Oh, Stellaris. I'm actually going to be covering, streaming some Stellaris later this month. I believe it is on the 11th, where Paradox has invited me to do some streaming on their channel as a sort of a guest streamer. But Stellaris is the penultimate 4X space strategy game. For the longest time, the Best in Show title for that particular genre was held by Master of Orion 2. It took that many years for Stellaris to come along and finally supplant it. Absolutely worth it. 75% off for the base game. There are a lot of DLCs to get into, but they are discounted as well. Definitely worth checking out if you are interested in 4X games or space games or both. Transport Fever. So whereas Railroad Corporation was transportation games done with a little lighter side, Transport Fever definitely gives you the screws and invites you to twist them. They give you a lot more details and control, as well as having more than just railroads to use to transport your goods. In fact, my playthrough, I focused more on vehicles because the railroads I found a little bit too fiddly to get into, and I found it to be a fun sort of personal challenge. But you can also do airplanes and boats as well. It is a diverse game, and I've seen people get some really elaborate builds. So if you're looking something like Transport Tycoon, like the old school one, but in 3D for a modern game, definitely look into it. Warlock 2, The Exiled, the third game I ever covered on my channel, and an oldie but good one. This is almost a Civilization-like game with a lot of RPG elements, because not only are you building up your cities, you're also building up your various units and your heroes and building up individual skills, as well as building up magical skills for your ruler, who is a warlock, so that you can do world-altering spells. It's an interesting twist on the genre. Definitely worth looking into, especially this heavily discounted. This War of Mine. Oh man, this game is heavy. This game is emotionally heavy. This game has you taking control of a group of civilians caught in the crossfire during a country at war. They are not on either side, but they still have to survive and not get killed by the various bits and pieces of war. This examines all the different trials and tribulations that somebody in a war-torn country may be going through, and they don't pull any punches on the reality of the situation. Light combat, management, exploration, scavenging, and crafting. This has a little of everything and wraps it together in a beautiful package. Definitely worth it. Dungeon of the Endless. This is actually in the same. This is a game not made by the producers of Endless Legend, who I'll be covering next, but a spin-off series set in the same universe. You are essentially a crash-landed ship of miscreants. Prisoners and what have you, has crash-landed into a planet and must reach the surface with this crystal core if you are to have any hope of escaping. Along the way, you need to strategically explore, one room at a time, the dungeon and each procedurally generated floor, while using your limited resources to craft new items or purchase new items, as well as light up the hallways, because enemies don't spawn in the light, but they will spawn in the darkness. But you don't have enough light to light up every single room. So it's a balancing act, and a satisfying one at that. Endless Legend. The original game that the Dungeon of the Endless was set in, Endless Legend is a city building game akin to Civ, but with a more fantasy based, sort of like Warlock 2. You don't have the world altering spells, but you have a much more deeper and nuanced combat where your troops are actually put into more focused combat groups, and combat plays itself out in a little bit more detailed fashion. Different races, different abilities, some races playing completely different, all onto the top of it with a planet that is slowly dying to an ice age. So you have a ticking clock to achieve victory before the entire planet freezes. Invisible Inc. Another procedurally generated roguelike, but this one with a lot of tactical elements. Picking out your agents, picking out your equipment, and taking the higher risk, higher reward items or not to try and secure yourself more resources is the name of the game here. There are a lot of things in here where taking the easy path is doable, but often really yields far fewer rewards, and if you skip out on too many rewards, you will find yourself up against the wall on the later missions. Brutal, but very fair difficulty curve. Very much, if you're into spy thrillers or cyberpunk type deals, this is the game for you, especially if you're for tactical positioning. Love it. Absolutely love it. Also made by Klee, who does Oxygen Not Included. Prison Architect. Recently acquired by Paradox Interactive, Prison Architect charges you with building a prison, filling it with inmates, and keeping those inmates happy, hopefully rehabilitated, or at the very least not killing each other. As you opt to build the prison bigger and bigger and take in more and more notorious and dangerous inmates, and try to keep the entire thing under control. It has sort of an element of almost like Dwarf Fortress in that you can build up a beautifully stable thing, but one or two little incidents can set the entire thing into a nightmare spiral, and it is delightful when that happens. So definitely check it out, and I'm curious to see where Paradox goes with it, with its development further on. Recettear, an item shop tale. So this is an interesting one. This is essentially an RPG with an action RPG with shopkeeping and business elements to it. You are a Recette who has awoken to find herself the owner of her father's shop, but also the owner of her father's debt. And the shop is deep in debt. So it is up to you, with the aid of a fairy, to get the shop built up and turn around enough inventory and make enough money so that you can pay the bank off before they foreclose on your shop and take everything from you. So it's an interesting mix of genres, and I do like me some genre mixers. Definitely check it out if you like some action JRPG mixed with management sim. Beyond Earth. So Beyond Earth was their attempt to tackle and strike lightning with Alpha Centauri. They did not. They did not quite strike the lightning. Whereas Stellaris definitely took the throne from Master of Orion 2. Alpha Centauri, which is of the same era as Master of Orion 2, has not, in my opinion, given up its throne to Beyond Earth. That being said, Alpha Centauri is an old school game. Then there are many people who like more modern graphics and design aesthetics, and Beyond Earth is not a bad game by any means. It just isn't Alpha Centauri. 75% off, though. Cities Skylines. So another entry and another triple-digit length series during my coverage of it. City Skylines is the answer to what EA did to SimCity, and well, that's a whole other rant there. But essentially, the fact that this game was greenlit when EA released their last SimCity game is very telling of why this game is doing so well. And it's not just because EA failed. This game stands on its own 2 feet, and it is darn fun. And as you acquire the various DLCs, which are also on sale, you just make a more deeper and richer city building experience. So if you're looking to scratch that old SimCity itch, but you need something more modern, this is the title to go to. Project Highrise, the spiritual successor to Sim Tower, which is one of the original pre-EA Maxis games that I loved as a child. Project Highrise has you building up an office tower or residential tower or commercial tower, basically a tall building. And how you build it up and how you specialize it is up to you. And the fact that you can build it in so many different ways and the different parts interact with each other, some ways synergizing with each other, such as the office crowd going to eat lunch at your lunch places, and oftentimes conflicting with each other as, different commercial zones create noise that some of your other tenants don't like. So piecing it all together in a large, stable, and profitable venture is definitely worth the investment. And if you ever liked Sim Tower back in the day, get this one. It is definitely worthy of the spiritual successor title. Civilization 6, 77% off for the base game, and I've been referencing this game a lot in regards to a lot of my other games being covered here. The Civ 6, definitely a strong contender to the series. I like it a lot more than 5, I'll tell you that. And yeah, what's more to say but Civilization 6? Build wonders, build canals, build maps, build everything. They actually just released a map creator, so if you don't like playing in randomly generated planets, well, just make your own. Definitely worth it if you are into the Civilization game and you want to get the classic experience. And lastly, we have Lethis Path of Progress at the steepest discount of 90% off. This is somewhat akin to Hearthlands. It is a walking city builder, similar also to Caesar and Pharaoh. Where this one, where Hearthlands had combat as its twist, this one has steam as its twist. It is set in a steampunk world, and building up some of the higher level Victorian, wealthier manors requires a lot more infrastructure to get steam-powered robots and servants and other higher tier materials, while still keeping the lower tier folks happy. Definitely a curious little game, and I had fun with it while I covered it. So that, my friends, is the Steam Summer Sale. 50 games, all covered on my channel, all in sale, from 25% off to 90% off. Chances are somewhere in this list there is a game that you don't own, but you're curious about. And there's a link to my playlist on every single one of these games, because everyone has been covered on my channel. So if you're not sure what a game looks like, or if you're not sure you'd like a game and you want to see more about it, or, if I did strategy tactics on it, you want to get some opening tips for it, check out my links in the lists below, check out the games, and enjoy. And I apologize in advance for your wallets. Pinstar, out. Go Team Cockatiel!